Hi, and welcome to our session on what's new in SQL 11.14. This was a live webinar done this morning on July 15th. We had a little bit of choppiness with our recording, so I am re-recording. So if you sat through the webinar and experienced any sound or visual issues, I apologize. And if you're listening again, know that I'm trying to repeat the session from this morning, but may not do it exactly as planned. So if I sound a little different, that's why. I'd like to welcome you all today to listening whenever you do have a chance to listen. And I am Cheryl Quinlan. I am the support manager for the SQL products. And I am very happy that you're able to join us today and also listen to the recording. We've got about 30 minutes planned today. We want to talk about our new version and what's included. We want to talk about a new feature called null variable support. We also need to mention what security updates we've been up to lately. We have some new functionality and also a new feature inside of the Viewpoint Explorer. So from there, we're going to jump in and look at what is our new version. And our new version has several components. And as I was preparing this PowerPoint, I'm working from home in Chicago, and it was last week. It was pretty hot and sticky up here that week, and I was kind of thinking about that this version is just like a nice, light, refreshing version. There's nothing that's going to, roll over you like a huge wave. And so I was kind of thinking about it just being like a nice, calm lake, really. And that's what we're getting in 11.14. By this point, SQL and Viewpoint are both fairly mature products and fairly stable products, and we're at the point where we're looking just to stay updated and give you some nicer features as they come along. So an 11.14 host version also goes along with the Viewpoint version of 11.20.174. Now, if you never knew, what that version means is version 11. The 20 is for year 20. And 174 is for the Julian day of the year. We also have a new version of the SQL web interface if you're utilizing our browser access. And on top of that, we have a new version of the SQL web server, which we affectionately call Swiss, and that's version 7.7. There are some instances if you're using the browser tool that you would want to have a Swiss server connection. And we also have a new version of eSend. eSend is our tool that takes spool files and either emails them or FTPs them, and it's also utilized under the covers by SQL in some capacities. The biggest feature that we have in this version is related to variables, and it's something called null variables. And you've maybe been using null variables all along, though you just haven't really realize that that's what we are going to refer to them as. And what a null variable is the ability to remove the variable value at runtime. So for instance, in my small example here of this view, I have a variable on the where clause so that I can today run this for one state. Maybe I want Illinois, but tomorrow I want California, but maybe next week I want all of the states. All of the customers from every state. So I could set my view up to utilize star all. And at runtime, if I specified star all, there would be some triggers within the variable definition to remove the C state equal sign from the where clause. And you would have had to do that in a very manual approach by indicating which values on the where clause you would want to remove as a leading or a trailing value, either to the left or to the right of the variable. And it was pretty picky about spacing. It wasn't so particular about upper or lower case, but if you accidentally had a space around your equal sign, then it wouldn't work. And what we looked to do in this next version is to make that a more simple approach, something far more user-friendly. Because dissecting that SQL statement can get kind of nitty-gritty at times, particularly if the where clause is very involved with a lot of Boolean logic, if it had a lot of ands and ors. There is one caveat to this enhancement, and it only applies to views that are using a connection type of local sys with the syntax of star server. Now, that connection type is one of our newer connection types, and by newer, I mean, probably at least 5 years or so, or actually way longer than that, probably about 15 years as time kind of rolls on. But it's not the original format. So many of you are probably using views that are a server connection type of star SQL with syntax of star SQL. And that served us very well for a long time. And there's actually a lot of nice things about the SQL syntax, but it's not as powerful now as the server syntax. And what server syntax is the native SQL. It is very portable from one product to the next, and it offers a lot of functionality in terms of joining and something called common table expressions, just all types of things. And it is a mode that we are encouraging use. So maybe if you're going to create something new, you might want to try this local sys server combination. And with this variable, if you were going to set it up with star all you have to do is click on the null-capable, and that's it. Now, if you're thinking about what is that happening under the covers there, when you install 11.14 on your host and Viewpoint, all of your views that you have, if they're local sys server, they will run as is. I'm kind of using the old methodology for the star all until you open up that view in the design mode. And once you open it in the design mode, if you went to the variables tab, you would see this new setting for null capable. Once you save it, then going forward, it's using the new methodology. Now, if that view were referenced in a script or a CL program and had set var associated with passing star all of that is still going to work just as before. I think this is important that we take a look at, but let me tell you why first that this does work. So this works because we have now a SQL Java server job running behind the scenes. When you install 11.14, that job will start automatically. It's in SQL library. It's just going to be out there to help receive these requests so that we can better dynamically remove elements of the where clause to make this star, this null capable or star all functionality work. We've also included commands so that the server can be ended and started. So let's take a look at what we are talking about. So here is Viewpoint. And I'm going to connect to an iSeries. And when I start a new view, we're going to look at this from the sense of creating a new view. I am going to begin with what we call the view builder. Now, this is my preference, and if you've been part of any of these sessions with me in the past, you'll probably have heard me plug the view builder. It's what we call a guided interface into building and designing my view. It gives me a step-by-step approach to pick files, fields, and so on to build that view. Now, if I want, the view designer is still there and it's all ready to go. And it's actually a matter of your set defaults, which determines how we default which designer. I'm going to go ahead and pick local host, which based upon my defaults is going to be a local sys connection. And over here, I'm defaulting to the syntax of star server. Once I pick that connection type, my defaults are set to already define a library. So I'm going to pick my customized file from that library. And then I'm just clicking next. The next step of building the view is picking fields. This is the select clause. I'll go ahead and pick 3 fields. And my next step is the filter tab. The filter tab is like the where clause. And what the filter tab is going to allow me to do is to create my variable for the state. It pops up a little window the moment I click see state, and I can pick my condition. It defaults to equal, which is what I'll use today, but all of the other symbols are available. But I want to have a variable. So the moment I click variable, the view builder automatically fills in ampersand C state. And from there, I'm basically done with the minimum it takes to set up a variable. I'll click next, to go to the next step, and that will be for sorting. And I'll optionally use the sorting to sort by the customer name. When I get to the variable tab, you'll see that I have one variable. And if I click on that, I bring up a window. And this is the window similar to what we saw inside of the PowerPoint. And it already defaulted to a type of QString. That's because Viewpoint knew that my state field was a character field. It has a length of 4, which is 2 longer than the field length to accommodate the quotes. It pulled in some text from the column heading. And now if I want this to be a null-capable, meaning using that star all I have to do is click null-capable. And it automatically fills in this default value of star all. And I can click done. Now from here, I'm going to click finish so that I come out of the View Builder, and it actually brings me to the Actions tab of the View Designer. I happen to really like this tab, and maybe it's because I'm getting older and my eyes are more tired, but all of the same options that are listed down here on the left side are options that are available across the top. They're just a little bit bigger here, and I like that. So I'm going to go ahead and click Display. And when I display a runtime prompted view from inside of the designer, I have the option to see the Show SQL statement. Notice it defaulted to star all, and if I click on Show SQL, it will show me what the SQL statement is going to look like with the variables interpreted. So with the star all and that null-capable pressed, it actually removed this C-state equal sign from my where clause, as well as the variable. Now, it was smart enough to put 1 = 1 on my where clause because I don't want to run with an empty where clause. Now, in most cases, in real life, you have far more elaborate where clauses than the one I'm using, for example, today. So that likely may not be an issue. But if I go ahead and display this, I will show you that we're getting all of the records from the cusmas file, regardless of what state that customer is in. They're sorted by the customer name because that's how I sorted, but notice that the state is from all over the place. If I run this just one more time and get prompted and change the state to, I'll go with Illinois because that's where I'm sitting. And if I show you the SQL statement again, this time it does have where state equals Illinois with the appropriate quotes. If I display that, it will return only the customers in Illinois. And that's our quick demo on the null-capable. Moving back into our PowerPoint, our next item to talk about are the security updates. Now, security updates are not really all that exciting. You know, if we're kind of thinking about water and being on the water, security updates are, if you're a boater, maybe this makes more sense to you. But probably the big payoff of being a boater, or better yet, being a guest on a boat, is going out in the afternoon and being on the lake and you know, sailing around or fishing or whatever it is you're doing out there on the beautiful lake. But somebody's got to clean that boat, prepare that boat, even clean the dock. And that's a little bit what security updates are like. They're kind of the work under the covers that we really don't see a lot of benefit in, but they're absolutely necessary in order to keep the ship sailing forward. So most recently, we had actually a handful of customers ask us about something called ActBar. It's a file, it was a file in Viewpoint. With this version of Viewpoint, the 1120.174, ActBar has been removed. And that's because it was coming up on some vulnerability reports. So Viewpoint's no longer using it, so actually our installation is going to remove it. We figured it was better that we remove it. We're probably the last ones out there in the world using it. And this way you wouldn't have to run around to all the PCs and have an administrator remove it. With SQL Web Interface, we had 2 updates related to the Apache and the Tomcat versions. Again, not really exciting, but completely necessary to avoid any vulnerabilities. What is a little bit more exciting is some new functionality. So we have a couple new functions, and we'll first start by talking about convert date and convert time. And you're saying, well, those aren't new, and they're not. But up until this version of SQL, the host mode, they were limited to being used only with a *SQL connection. So if you were, or really SQL syntax, it would have worked also with local sys SQL, but then we were converting that under the covers. In other words, convert date and convert time worked only with the good old SQL SQL. And as we try to push forward to using more local sys server, one of the things we heard from customers was, hey, but I really like that convert date function. It makes converting my numeric date or character date to a date data type so easy. So in this version, we do have an additional function that will work in the local sys server setting. The only difference between the two is in the local sys server setting, as you can see on the SQL on the left-hand side of my screen, is that the format, when you inside of the convert date function tell it what the date looks like today, requires single quotes. So on the left side, you notice that the YMD1 is enclosed in single quotes, but on the right-hand side, using that SQL type of connection, the YMD1 does not require quotes. So that is one difference between using the function in server syntax versus SQL syntax. But hopefully that will encourage you to use that syntax more often. Another function to kind of keep us sailing along is related to extracting the year and the month from a date data type. A lot of customers do reporting based upon months, kind of spread the year month across in different columns to do comparisons and year-to-date numbers and so on. Well, it's something that you could have gotten. You could always could have gotten the year and month from a date data type, but you would have had to figure out how to lop off the day section or kind of paste it together. So given the frequency of how often we saw this, we said, hey, we should have functions either to get 4-digit or 2-digit year with just the month. So if we ran this today over, a date data type whose date was today, we would get 2007, not as in year 2007, but as in year 20, month 07. And then for the second example, we would have 2020-07. Some additional functionality too that we are providing in this version of 11.14 is a new sample library called SQLEX2. We're still installing SQLEX, but we've added a new library because all of the objects in the SQLEX2 library are under local sys server syntax. And if you're not, if you want to, you can take a look at the examples in there and just start to get a little bit more familiar with that syntax. And what's nice is that they have their counterpart in SQLEX that is a star SQL syntax so that you could pull them up and kind of compare and contrast the various versions and the various syntax. And there's some that, may not be a one-for-one match. There were a couple that actually objects in SQLEX that were fairly older and kind of didn't have an exact translation, in fact, because they were obsolete. But there are some really interesting syntax, particularly the ones related to subqueries and also the ones that become common table expressions. And though I would encourage you to look at that and start getting your feet wet with this local sys server methodology. The last item that we wanted to talk about today is the Viewpoint Explorer. Now, this is a picture of the Viewpoint Explorer, which is just our list of, typically libraries and views, but from repository mode. Now, repository mode is not a mode that many of you are using. It's because it's not the original mode. The original mode we refer to as host mode, as it's more IBM I-centric. This repository mode, it came out in the last couple years, and it is a little bit more Windows-centric in that it has folders and then can have subfolders. And once you get into the folder that you're looking at, you can have SQL objects as well as other Windows objects in that folder. But most importantly, they can have very long names. You're not restricted to the 10 character names that you are when you're in host mode using Viewpoint the way you are accustomed to. Now, if you're also a SQL Web Interface user, this repository mode would translate there as well in with the same folder structure. And actually from the browser, the repository mode looks very modern and very clean. It's been a little bit more updated. But the big enhancement that came with this version of Viewpoint, which is 11.20.174, is that Viewpoint will now allow you to open the other types of objects, the Windows objects that are in that list. So you notice in this list that we have an Excel file and we also have a text file. So right from the Viewpoint Explorer, I can open either one of those, or if there's a Word document in there. The same applies from the browser. It's just new now that Viewpoint supports this. And this gives your users maybe one kind of home base for all of their shared documents and to get at things. And the security on this folder structure is extremely good. And you can set it down to the folder level by user, which is very nice. So that's kind of what we've got in a nutshell. And this morning when we were doing this live, we had the opportunity to ask for questions, and we did have a couple of questions that I'm going to kind of paraphrase right now. Someone asked, well, you seem to be pushing, local sys server connections over the SQL thing quite a bit. Why? And I was really glad that question came up, because I really didn't tell you why. I just kind of said, hey, it's new. It does have far more supports far more complex SQL, but the big advantage is the performance. So if your view has a connection type of star SQL, it has to use what's called the CQE, which is the classic query engine on the IBM I. A local sys view can use the SQE, which is the newer query engine, and those requests are going to run much faster. So that's the huge reason why we keep pushing this, as well as, if you are, have a coworker who maybe has had experience with Microsoft Access, then that SQL is going to be more compatible with that, because they're all using the same framework, whereas the SQL syntax has a few idiosyncrasies. Some of them real nice, but the native will be far more portable. Then the other question we had was about the null-capable variable. And someone asked, would it work with a DB list? So a DB list is the ability to get a drop-down list. So at runtime, if you think of my example, I could have set up my views in the prompt so that I could click and pick the state. So I wouldn't have to know all the 2-digit state abbreviations. And the question was, would this null-capable work if I also had a DB list? And the answer is yes. It would most definitely work if you were using a DB list. Well, I want to thank you for taking the time to listen. I also want to give a plug to our portal. In the email that you received with this recording, there's a link to our portal, and the portal is where you can do, many things related to SQL and Viewpoint. You can get your downloads on the download page, which is where you would download this new version. There's a KBA or knowledge base section where you could search and maybe find an answer. You can also chat with us from many points within the portal, and that's a great way to initiate with the contact with the support team. And if you'd like, you can open up your own case and even check the status of your cases from the portal. So the portal is our our new home. It's not so new, but I call it new because we're still trying to drive folks there. But it is a great place for you to find resources related to your products, and not just SQL products. If you have other help systems products, they're all out there as well. Then we also kind of talked about versions and whether or not your host version and your Viewpoint version need to stay exactly in sync. Of course, in a perfect world, that's what we would like. But we know the world's not perfect, and we know that sometimes it takes some time from getting the host updated to rolling Viewpoint out on many PCs. And so as long as you're one or two within a version, that's okay. But if your host version is, say, 5 years old, and you want to try to use new Viewpoint, one, all of the new features won't work exactly because sometimes a host change is required. And two, we don't do that type of testing from 5-year-old host software or even longer. And I know that SQL does tend to work and work well from the host. And I know sometimes the years fly by without any upgrades, but I would encourage you to take a look at that. If you're in Viewpoint and you connect to Help About, you can see what version of Viewpoint as well as the host version that you have. And I'd encourage you not to get too far behind on those versions. I'm Cheryl Quinlan, and I would love to hear from you if you ever have any questions. My email is cheryl.quinlan@helpsystems.com. You could also reach me through the support email address, support.sql@helpsystems.com, which is a great way also to reach our team if you like to just shoot us an email. And you can always call us to reach out to us with questions. We still do like to hear the voices of our customers. So I want to thank you for joining today, and do reach out if you have any questions about this version or anything else. And I hope that you do have an enjoyable summer, and hopefully you all take care. Thank you.